Thank you so much for listening to Breadwinning Mums. We really appreciate your continued support over the last year, and we're happy to announce that we have published the Breadwinning Mums book. Yay! This book is based on the conversations from the Breadwinning Mums Season 1 episodes. It highlights the candid journeys of each mums, as well as a golden nugget of wisdom from their life's lessons. Now is the perfect time to give the gift of the Breadwinning Mums book to the special mums in your life or to yourself. No matter where you are in life, I'm sure the practical tips within the Breadwinning Mums book will help you take your lives just a little bit further. Limited copies available, so order yours now at breadwinningmums.com. That's breadwinningmums.com. Coming up next on the Breadwinning Mums.
Drivenness as a quality is not something you want to pursue. Now, there's a kind of a belief that somehow if we don't drive our children, they won't have any motivation. That's just simply not the case. Human beings are naturally creative, and also they naturally want to contribute. That's it's like the joy of life.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast. This is a place where we debunk the myths of working mums, cheer each other on, and show the world that you can be a mum and still pursue excellence in your chosen area of expertise. Today I'm so excited to be chatting with Steve Biddulph, an Australian author, activist and psychologist who has written a number of influential best-selling books and lectures worldwide on parenting and kids education. We spoke about his latest book, Wild Creature Mind, how to raise better children by first taking better control over our own emotions, and how to embrace the elders in our lives whilst continuing to pass on our wisdom to the younger generations. Steve Biddulph, welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast.
Thank you, Jane. It's great to see you, and hello to anyone who's listening or watching. Hi from Tasmania. Yeah.
The land of the gods, as we know it. So, Steve, you're a man who needs no introduction. You've touched so many lives across so many generations, but also so many countries. But before we go into all of the details, I'd like to ask a very simple question. Who are you as a human, Steve?
Well, I'm a wobbly old man. My life's been a series of kind of shambolic stumbles that have sometimes just miraculously worked out. And now I'm in cognitive decline. I'm worn out, but I haven't stopped caring about the human race. And I think the work of an old person, of an elder, is to look at the big picture, how to make sure that the next generations survive. And I see that as being very much in the balance, in a very fraught place, in a very struggling world. And so that's why I'm still here. I'm not just gone off fishing or playing
Kayaking.
golf, because that would be just a travesty of life. And so I'm still doing my best showing up in a podcast and still writing books to see if they can solve these enormous problems that the world faces. And and I hope I'll do that till my last breath.
And we are so very grateful. So thank you so much for keeping, putting values out there into the world to making a better improvement for humanity. I'd like to take us back to the very young Steve. Could you tell us what the young Steve was like?
Yeah, well, I grew up on the north coast of Yorkshire in England in the 1950s. And what I remember is mostly it was a golden time. And I think it's true, anyone who's got little boys or has raised little boys, that it's little children, they live in this sort of golden world of the sky and the wind and the beach was there nearby and playing. And what I mostly remember is, my absolutely just took for granted my parents were kind and they were safe to be around. I was very lucky for those times. That hugging had not been invented, as far as I know, in the
Yeah.
1950s. Nobody hugged anyone.
Yeah.
And so if there was a rare opportunity, like I remember watching the soccer with my father on a windy soccer field in a winter's day, and he had a long coat, and so he just I must have said, Daddy, can we go home? I'm freezing or something, and he just pulled me into his coat and buttoned it around the front, so my little face was sticking out. I just remember how lovely it was to be pressed against him and held
Mm.
safe, because hugs and things only happen by accident in those
Mm.
times, and so. But I lived in England till I was 9, and it was a lot of fun. Occasionally, it was terrifying. Yorkshire was a rough place. Um, there would be fights in the street, things like that, and occasionally, I was already beginning some of those effects of me having Asperger's syndrome, where I just didn't understand what people were on about. Um,
Mm.
and my first day at school, somebody said, a little boy leaned over the table and said, "We're going to get a gang onto you."
Mm.
Um, and I, my my first thought was, that's not a grammatical sentence. Um, that's how Asperger's I was. I said that sentence isn't
Yeah.
grammatical,
Yeah.
but I knew there was danger, and
Yeah.
so this is the first day of school, Jane, and
Oh,
so
wow.
so at morning recess, I just decided I don't think school is a good place, so I let myself out of the school gate and I walked home.
Oh, wow.
And so, so this little boy walking across these, intersections and
Yeah.
and back to my house, which is fortunately just a few blocks away. I went into my mum's house. My mum's like shocked. You're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and said to mum, let's, we won't do school. It's not for me.
Oh, wow. So she's
Yeah,
open to it
yeah.
though. She
And
listened to you.
well, no, it was I sort of grabbed
Oh, okay.
straight back
Okay.
to school. Um, so my first escape attempt was not successful. But
Okay.
but that was just one unhappy day. Mostly it was fun. It was a beautiful time being a little boy.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so you grew up with undiagnosed Asperger's that we know now. How did you see your younger self as a psychologist now, knowing all of the medical terminologies and how people react to certain things with certain diagnoses?
Okay, well, um, when you're yes, it's a very easy division in my life because we emigrated to Australia when I was 9,
Mm.
and and so um, in the little boy time, it kind of doesn't matter. Little boys don't talk much. They have friends, but the friends just run about together. They don't have deep conversations. Perhaps now it's a little bit different, but it wasn't an issue.
Mm.
In um, the teen years are all about relationships and that great consuming interest of a teenage boy, which is to be able to talk to girls. And if someone had said, "What is and this actually happened. I started university to study physics. I was going to be a
Ah.
meteorologist, and I was interested in clouds and Antarctic and things like that. And And that was just like, it was like some must be some kind of late puberty or something, because I just suddenly woke up and thought, this is so boring.
Okay.
And if I'd asked myself, well, okay, well, said to myself, well, Stephen, what is your life's goal? Um, and the answer came straight back. It's to be able to talk to girls.
Okay. Yeah.
And not asking, not asking
Yeah.
a lot, Jane, just be able to actually talk to girls would be
Were you
fantastic. I
not,
could,
hold on, were you not talking to girls beforehand?
no, no, and or this by I guess by mid-teens, I knew that I could see there was this thing called conversation that people did.
Yeah.
It looked it looked like a lot of fun, and I wanted to join in. But I would try, and it just would never work. And even with Asperger's, where you don't read body signals or facial signals very well,
Yeah.
it's pretty clear when people actually sort of walk away from you, um,
Okay.
that you haven't quite hit the ball, and
Yeah.
and and, and so um, and so it was. I thought, okay, how can I learn to join the human race? Maybe psychology would help. Maybe, you get this book, there was no internet, there's a book of things you can study. Just the next page from physics, right over the page, the next one was psychology
Psychology. Yeah.
with P's. And
Yeah.
and I thought,
P.S.
I know,
Yeah.
okay, I know what that is. That's talking to girls. And so I
Mm.
went back to, I'd failed university. I went back to university, signed up for psychology, and and it was not always what I'd hoped for, but when you finally became a psychologist, it was a golden era of humanistic psychology where there was a lot of breaking away from all this old, rats in mazes kind of psychology and towards the human potential
Mm.
side. And I gradually learned, that there's rules for conversation, that um, when when you're talking, you say a little bit and then you pause and let the other person talk back to you. It's like table tennis, or it's a to and fro. Don't just talk.
Yeah.
There's facial expressions. If you pay attention to those, you can see what people might be feeling, and what they're feeling might be important to know. And so that, in fact, what regular neurotypical people know almost instinctively, well, yes, actually instinctively, can be learned. And
Mm.
but Jane, what happened was that it's actually having to think before you speak and to formulate, sensitively what to say, is actually not a bad thing. There's
Mm.
there's lots of neurotypical people who would benefit from doing that.
Mm.
Being attuned to the faces of the people around you deliberately and carefully is not a bad thing. And so what happened was I kind of skipped over normal. I could then be, for instance, have an audience, which was my day job for 35 years, was to stand in front of an audience of 500 people, and I could pretty much read the faces of everyone in the room, and I knew,
Mm.
whether people were with me or not, and if there was someone
Mm.
in distress, I could see that, and I could adapt what I was saying, and I could connect with them and hold them so that they could come through what I was describing. And so it kind of went from being a deficit to
Mm.
being a bit of a
Your
super.
superpower.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so now there were many, many parts to that which we could talk about: having a fantastic spouse, partner in life. Neurodivergent people often, if they're very, very fortunate, marry someone who has got incredible emotional intelligence,
Mm.
and the combination begins to kind of ferment and cook.
Mm.
So I'm very much simplifying it,
Yeah.
but looking back on my teenage years is a mixture of like absolute embarrassment, and hopefully a bit of compassion. That I had my teachers actually said this at some stage. They never gave up on me. It was, I think they said, imagine the discussion in the staff room. Oh, that Stephen Biddulph, what, he's such a mess. but he's got a good heart.
Yeah.
And so if there was a school camp, I'd be invited along, and they'd make sure to include me. And later on, youth workers, people in the church. And this is what I'd say, if you know someone who's struggling socially,
Mm.
just include them,
Mm.
say hi to them. Um,
Mm.
we know what happens when neurodivergent people go badly wrong. If you look at anyone from Elon Musk to some of the people who commit terrible things in the
Mm.
world,
Mm.
it's kind of goes either way. Either you become fantastic or just really, really a problem. And
Yep.
so when people are on the fringes and lonely, and
Mm.
and then what happened with me was youth workers and people, believed in me,
Mm.
kept me in the loop,
Mm.
treated me like I mattered. So I never became bitter or isolated.
Mm.
And I felt like there's a place for me. There's a place for me in the human race.
Mm.
And I can feel myself almost tearing up when I think of it,
Mm.
how it could have gone versus how
Mm.
amazingly it did go. And
Yep.
so my gratitude, anyone out there who's a youth worker or a school teacher who looks out for the lonely kid, you know,
Mm.
God bless you. Um, yeah, good on you, and keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. The power of human acceptance. I think that's, at the end of the day, we're all social mammals and we long for that acceptance and belonging.
Yes, Jane. I'm sure that's just the same for you and
Yeah, for
everyone.
every one of us.
Yeah. Mm.
Mm. Oh, thank you, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. That's really wonderful. So, did the psychology degree pay off? Were you able to speak to girls outside of, the 500 audience?
Yes, yes, um, um, being a therapist was an incredible experience because you kind of you stick with the fundamentals of life. That doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. If you're not happy, it's no good. And so I think the therapy world has got this unique insight into what's real. For instance, that men who seem so tough and rough on the outside and so impossible are actually very vulnerable on the inside. And so it's
Mm.
great to see below the surface of humanity. Um, but I think the biggest positive, which I really would want people to know, was Sharon. And I met Sharon when I was about 19, and so still a student. And I would like to be able to say, that I saw her intelligence and her amazingness as a human being, and her deep wisdom, but actually was none of that. It was just like, oh, you know, um, so you get lucky. Okay. Sometimes you just get lucky in this world, and and um, and Sharon brought really different things. She came from a very violent family
Mm.
that was crushing poverty, a big family, five sisters, who cooked their own dinner at night when they were about 8 years old because their mum was
Oh,
working so
wow.
hard, cleaning houses and doing things to support them. But it was for some reason, or things that the social worker or psychologist would say are not good beginnings. Somehow Sharon turned that into a
Yeah.
resolve, and in particular, a resolve to create a safe family and that we would raise children without violence.
Yeah.
And I guess out of that, would we're able to write books about how to do that. And
Mm.
had a kind of a, um, a really strong drive to fix that in the world. The intense negativity, like now we're talking about the 1980s, no, 1970s and 80s.
Mm.
Most people still belted their children.
Mm.
everybody told their children as a way of steering them, how no good they were, how
Mm.
lazy they were, how stupid they were. Um, Very few people were affectionate and positive.
Mm.
And this is a great paradox. People back then loved their kids. And
Mm.
the families I was seeing as a psychologist, these were blue collar families. In Launceston was an industrial mill town.
Mm.
Jane, you've come to Tasmania. You know now that Launceston is a world capital of culture and sophistication. Um, I'm slightly joking here, but it's but
Okay.
it's but it's come a long way. But back then it was, the mill whistle sounded and people in overalls marched in and then they marched out again, exhausted and went to the pub and got drunk and went home. It was
Mm.
a working class town.
Mm.
And but those dads loved their children as much as
Mm.
dads today, and their mums loved their kids. And but their tools that they had available were
Yeah.
so primitive. They were
Yeah.
straight out of the British Empire, you know, yelling, hitting,
Mm.
um, um, go to your room, never darken my door again. Um, and I know I've just been working in Shanghai in China and talking to parents there, and that generational shift from
Mm.
um, the father as a terrifying authority figure,
Mm.
the mum as a harassed, struggling person.
Yeah.
Um,
Safe person.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And um, and the generational shift to say that, you know, mental health really matters, and kids have to be cuddled and they have to be listened to, and
Mm.
told they're wonderful, and when they're little,
Mm.
that they're precious and special. Um,
Mm.
and if you do that, then children feel safe,
Yeah.
and so they don't get as dysregulated, um, and they want to help and they want to cooperate. Um,
Mm.
and they'll still need boundaries, but it's not a business of smashing a little human being into the mold,
Yeah.
which we people genuinely thought. They thought that's kind of, kids are fundamentally evil and you have to, belt it out of them. It was a nightmare, hundreds,
Mm.
centuries of nightmares.
Mm.
And The Secret of Happy Children was the book that came out of that 5 years working as a family therapist and thinking, people just need to know there's a better way.
Yeah.
And once we had a sticker that was in the book for a while. It was, "Our home is a no smacking zone."
Mm.
Just to raise that question, And
Mm.
I always, I've actually seen this poster now, but I invented this poster 40 years ago it shows, I imagine it as a billboard by the side of the road, a little, and all it shows is a big father's hand coming down and a little girl's hand going up, and maybe
Yeah.
the side of his trousers or something
Yeah.
going walking along, and the caption is, "I always feel safe with my dad."
Yeah.
And as a kind of aspirational thing
Mm.
to the men who drive past that poster,
Mm.
your kids feel safe with you, um,
Mm.
and because the answer would often be, well, sometimes I lose it with my kids, and I just
Mm-hmm.
yell at them,
Mm-hmm.
and or I belt them when I'm, had a bit too much to drink, and I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I and if I'm with a group of men, I will often put the question, dads say, put the question, how did you get on with your dad?
Yeah.
Who's whose dad in the room belted them?
Yeah.
By the hands. What was it like as a kid to be when that happened? And
Mm-hmm.
and in an honest group where the men are honest with each other, it's like it was horrible. I hated him.
Yeah.
Um, I wet the bed,
Mm.
it was terrible.
Yeah.
Um, Now you could grab that man and ask him in a pub something, he'd say, yeah, didn't bother me,
Mm.
didn't do me any harm. Um, and so a big part of my work was changing men
Mm.
and um, and we say if you feel the wounds if you feel your own wounds, then you can, if you truly feel your own wounds, you can never pass them on to your children. You could never pass them on.
Mm.
And um, so we began a revolution in
Mm.
in the whole idea of how a family operates. That the men and women are equal partners, and maybe they bring different things. It could be two men in a marriage. It could be two women in a marriage. It's the partnership that matters.
Mm.
The children are intrinsically beautiful and loving and needing love. Um,
Mm.
and we can help them. They just don't know how to manage big feelings when they're little.
Yep.
And that's our job to help them.
Yep.
And some very now quite still quite new ideas um, that when a child gets dysregulated, it's very easy for us to be dysregulated as well.
Yep.
And so our worst self tangles with their worst self, and it just makes things worse.
Yep.
So, what does that say as a parent to do?
Yep.
Always downregulate yourself be
Exactly.
before you tangle with a child. And
Yep.
so, so the new book, the Wild Creature book that's just
Mm.
come out, Wild Creature Mind, um, is all about how to get yourself woven back together so that you're um, steady and settled, um, and um, and then your interactions with other people are just naturally attuned, and you bring calmness to the picture. Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
That's a lot there, Steve. Thank you so much.
That's a
I
bit
really
of a
like,
ramble, but yeah.
no, there's a lot of golden nuggets there. I'd like to talk about a conversation that you had a while ago about young boys and how in the past, young boys have been raised to be that person of the one who are dominant, the one who are mentally tough, the one who will be sent to war and defend the nation. And now there is a significant shift in that we are no longer, well, the need for another generation of that is probably coming up again, but there is a strong argument that we probably don't need to bring that back home. But there is also a byproduct whereby in a family where I think the parental, but especially from a father's point of view, a father's acceptance is not displayed regularly, such as, the people like Elon Musk, people like Donald Trump. Yes, they did go through a very difficult hardship early on in life, and they may not necessarily experience physical abuse, but certainly there is a lot of emotional withdrawal or emotional hardship that they had to go through. But in a sense, it shaped them to be that focused, career-minded, driven individuals. And so, I guess that balance as a parent, how do we be mindful of our actions towards our children and embrace them for the beautiful human being that they are, but also encourage them to pursue that drive, that growth that they can actually go through in a safe zone?
Okay, now there's probably enough for 5 podcasts in that question. But let me just set out a few things. We'll get rid of those two ugly characters quickly and get on its back again. But being driven
Mm.
is not a healthy condition. Um,
Mm.
and always the kind of driven that Trump has, which is to be the center of the universe,
Mm.
kind of the drive of a neglected toddler, um, is is fatally destructive and always ends in disaster. Um, and um, drivenness as a quality is not something you want to pursue. Now, there's a kind of a belief um, that somehow if we don't drive our children, they won't have any motivation.
Mm.
Um, and that's just simply not the case. Um, and what happens when human beings are naturally creative, and also they naturally want to contribute. That's the, it's like the joy of life. The what we in manhood we described some kind of what are the fundamentals of manhood? What are the key secrets of being a man as composed to being a little boy? Because the little boy psychology is all, wow, look at me, what brave can I do? What amazing can I do? What adventures
Yeah.
can I have? And that's lovely and natural in a little boy.
Mm.
Um, but in the mid-teens, every culture in the world, going for millennia, always had a process of change it was called initiation, and they because the main preoccupation of every culture was to take male energy and make it life affirming,
Mm.
instead of life destroying. Now, I think that women's energy and style, and these are big generalizations that are not always the case. There's a lot of overlap in the
Mhm.
genders, but women's life affirmingness is is somehow always there. Um, you, Little girls will often get dollies and teddies and be nice to them and cuddle them and talk to them, and are just drawn to do that. And so I have a kind of a reverence towards the female gender. I think us men are just such fools, and that women are amazing. And but in the male development, every culture put in a concerted effort in the mid-teens to shift the boys to manhood, and there were probably some key messages that they were given. That, for instance, that you're going to die sometime. You're not immortal. Um, that you're you're not that important.
Yes, I saw that on your book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Your
It's
life
so
is
good.
not about you,
Mm.
because what it's a question of what brings us joy. And a new car, brings joy for about 2 weeks. Um, Getting married brings you joy for a couple of months. Um, Winning a lottery, couple of weeks. Um, um, the problem with Trump is, he only gets joy for 5 seconds and he needs some more. Um,
Mm.
and but what brings joy so clearly and evidently is being of service to other people,
Mm.
is bringing joy to others, and that seeing the smiles on the faces of your children and hearing the laughter of this was happening last night. My wife and my daughter were just laughing, a few meters away from me, and I was thinking, that is the most beautiful sound in the world. They're happy and safe, and even if they're laughing at me, I don't mind. It's um, um, when our little boy was born, it was an emergency cesarean operation. It was a bit of a nightmare because we'd started as a home birth, but we had the provision to
Ah.
transfer to hospital if needed, and sure enough, it was needed. But we had to
Mm.
deal with the hospital. I could be in the delivery suite, um, and um, and so I masked up and gowned up, and Sharon was rushed into the theatre, and I went in and I'd put my mask on back to front, or my gown on back, and I just looked ridiculous. And so Sharon's lying there, just everyone just starts laughing. Um, I, I, you know, I'm thinking, well, I have some purpose here still.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so this is a thing that, if boys understand this, um,
Mm.
um, what a blast it is to be of
Mm.
service.
Mm.
Um, and that this is the secret. If you care about, if you want to earn the love of a woman, um, um, of a deep, enduring kind, it won't be because of your abs. Um, it, it it won't be because of your pay packet. If you think it's your pay packet, you'll get a predatory person who just
Yeah.
sees you as a pay packet. Is that what you want?
Yeah.
Um, and so now teenage boys get very, I mean, we're laughing, Jane, but the teenage boys get very confused about this.
Yeah.
You know, they would think, no, I've got to. deal
Well, I would
drugs or
argue that the parents were also confused because they think that they wanted the best for their sons and daughters, but what would that best be? And
be.
as you explain, driven is not necessarily the answer either. So
No.
what you want is just a beautiful human being that is of service to the others. And if the parents have a different trajectory on which they are, pushing their children, then that will lead to a chain effect that will lead the little kids to a journey that may not even necessarily want.
Yes, yes. In Shanghai, I was working on this problem of this incredible problem of anxiety and depression in young people.
Mm.
You know, with where primary school children were committing suicide because of their
Mm.
school test results.
Primary
Um,
school, my
primary
goodness, that
school,
just
and
breaks your heart.
this it is a nightmare,
Yeah,
and trying to get the message out that unconditional love,
yeah,
where your child explicitly hears, if you end up being a delivery driver or sweeping the streets, and you're a good person
mm.
and you're happy and the people around you love you, you are a success. Now, I think you're pretty good at maths, and if you work hard at the end of the year and pass your test, of course that's going to help. It's
Yeah,
it's not kind of abandoning hard work and application and being a bit focused, but you don't
mm.
want to peak in grade four, um,
Mm.
and burn out by the time you're
Yeah,
in high school. And
yeah,
so, as a family,
yeah,
what we say to people is, look at what's the mood in your house? What's the vibe in your
mm.
house? And if it's kind of desperate hurry or
Mm.
ticking, to-do list,
Yes, yeah.
um, does that ring bells, Jane? Is that
Yes, I love your line. Hurry is the enemy of love. And
yeah?
I've just been taking a lot more mindful approaches. So I have two kids, 9 and 6 years old. And the 6 year old daughter still love playing, Mummy, can you come and play with me? Can you just stay here? And sometimes it can get, a bit repetitive playing cafe, say, ordering the same things and waiting for 10 minutes and pretending to sip and do that for 2 hours every day. It can be a bit repetitive, but I always go back to hurry is the enemy of love. This window is not going to be open forever for me. She's not going to want to do this with me in the next, I don't know, maybe 2 years, 3 years. She's going to move on to the next stage where she will grow to be that independent person. And so, yeah, just capturing each moment. And I just love that phrase that you came up with. It's just so simple. Hurry is the enemy of love. So just slow
Yes,
down.
yes, yes. And I'd love to. I'll just expand it a little bit, Jane, for people watching and so or listening, and that um, you know we love our children. There's no doubt about that. Um,
Hmm.
Apart from very, very rare circumstances, we have a fierce love for our littlies. Um, but what it having that as a feeling on the inside is only the starting point. And in
Hmm.
fact, you could say it's not enough because they have to feel it.
Hmm.
Um, and so um, now, operationally speaking, what love actually is intense attention, is having someone's full attention.
Hmm.
You know, we when we're in love as a young couple, um, this that feeling of like they're absolutely looking at you, absolutely listening to you, where
Yeah.
that even a hand touching a hand is electrifying.
Yeah.
And it's electrifying because every cell of us is noticing that. Um,
Yes.
and so when we're with our children, they sense we've written about this in Wild Creature Mind, that this fact that the right brain of each person reads the right brain of the other person. The wild creature is like a panther, and it knows, you know,
Hmm.
it just knows, are you with me or are you not?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so I'm spending a lot of time with little grandchildren right at the moment, and I know about those repetitive,
Hmm.
it's the long hours
Yeah.
But I also know from perspective that there's this great paradox of parenthood that the hours are long, but the years are short.
Yeah.
And so, you know, yes, it's really, really hard to get through a day.
Mm.
We should not have young parents living in their own house on their own. We should
Mm.
always be hanging out with other mums, play groups,
Mm.
hubs and neighborhood houses where you hang with other mums and their kids and other dads and their kids should be available to everyone.
Mm.
So that because it's lonely. Um, but um, the days can be long, um, but the years are fast. And so suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, they're at school now. They will never be little in my home again.
Yeah.
Um, Suddenly they're in puberty and they won't want to hang out with us on going on drives on a Sunday. You know,
Mm.
we'll want to play with them and they won't want to play with us.
Yeah.
Um, and and the whole sense of, oh, heck, I just miss those times.
Yeah.
Now everyone will miss them, but you'll miss them worse if you didn't actually do them in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I sit with my grandchildren, I breathe, I do my meditation, I settle down,
Mm. Mm.
I think, well, this is peaceful.
Yeah.
Um, and I just notice my body and I settle into myself. And of
Mm.
course, Jane, for me, is I'm in my decade of farewell, as I'm writing about on my Facebook page. I'm in the last decade of my life. And so every second is precious. You know, how how many times more will I get to hold the little child's hand or walk across a field in the afternoon sunshine? You know,
Mm.
how many times will I get to, I mean, I haven't got, my guitar is missing from its hook behind, but how many times will I play silly songs, and then just giggle and laugh at the songs
Yeah.
and um, yeah, so if we can, this is, an old person, old people need telling this to young people,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't rush past this. Um,
Yeah.
and also it's very practical.
Mm.
If your child's got a problem,
Mm.
they'll come to the kitchen and they'll take a kind of take the temperature, does mum, this boy said something to me today that I didn't like, but I didn't understand really, but I felt ick about what
Yeah.
that boy said. And this might be an 8-year-old girl.
Mm.
Does mum look like she's got a few minutes?
Yeah.
No, she looks pretty stressed.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I'll forget about that.
Yeah.
But if mum sort of turns around and says, come and join me, help me with what I'm doing. I want to hear about your day. Um,
Mm.
or dad does think I'm not, it could be dad just as much.
Mm.
Mum, this boy said this thing,
Mm.
Okay. And the mum kind of, goes very quiet and just keeps breathing and okay, let's get to the bottom of this. And honey, that's really terrible. Let me explain about this. And I think we should be talking to the teacher about this, but we'll work it out. We won't do anything too quick. Um,
Mm.
and you really need to know, you know,
Mm.
what's happening to them and what's in their world that is scary or unsettling.
Yeah.
Because um, if you're not a tellable parent, um,
Mm.
and I mean, what a paradox. It means in the busiest time of the day, you've got to look like,
Yeah.
you've got all the time in the world. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but dinner doesn't matter as much as, your child is being sexually harassed by a boy in grade six.
Yeah.
Um, and dinner doesn't matter as much as that your son hasn't got any friends and doesn't even know how to make them very well. Um,
Mm.
because childhood is intense. It's so
Mm.
intense. A little boy I heard about a while back, came home and he got into trouble at school for hitting his friend. And I think his mum even got a text from the school, Jonathan belted his friend.
Mm.
We're not planning to do anything, but if we can't do that. Um,
Mm.
and so at home that night, it's Jonathan, how was today? And he said, oh, it was all right. And she said, did anything bad happen? And well, he had a fight with Jonathan, and okay, Jonathan's your friend. You don't usually fight with him. And no, no, what happened? And well, he told me that he's going to move to Canada. Um,
Mm.
his dad's got a job work in Canada, and um, okay. And so what happened? And well, I belted him. I belted him.
He was angry. He was sad.
Yeah.
He was
Um,
in pain.
yeah. And and so this comes out and Jonathan, that's terrible. What did you do? What were you feeling inside when you heard he was leaving? I said, oh, I just felt really churned up inside. And
Mm.
in the new book, we're putting a big emphasis on this, helping your kids with this, not just their
Yes.
feelings, but the sensations, because it starts with
Yes.
sensations. And I just felt really like stirred up, and my tummy was like that. And okay, and Jonathan, is it possible that you're sad about him going? And suddenly there's got this little boy crying in
Mm.
your house, and you're saying it's that's really sad. I mean, girls have lots of friends, but most boys just have one. It's one of the interesting things about their nature. Um,
Yes, the same with my boy as well. Why is that,
yeah,
Steve?
yeah, we can
I
come back
noticed
to
that.
that. But
Okay,
but
all right.
the boy, um, he doesn't have a handle on his big feelings.
Mm.
And so you say, look, we have to do something about this, Jonathan. He's a good friend. We better have him over for a sleepover before he goes, because you've always wanted to do that. We never got around to it. And I'll talk to his mum, or we'll find out his email address or something, and maybe give him a goodbye present when he goes. We can maybe go visit him and have a goodbye present. And who knows, we might get to Canada one day or something and visit him, you never know. But it's his, you won't be seeing him every day at school.
Mm.
And 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 that is hard. And I know that's hard. And I feel sad for you. And so what he experiences is like, okay, really rough things happen in this world. There are griefs that cannot be taken away. But my mum is so much alongside me, or my dad is so much alongside me. It's it's hard, but it's bearable.
Mm.
And in the process of childhood, we go through more and more severe tests of what the world will send our way.
Mm.
To literally are gradually learning to face the absolute nightmare that the world is. Uh,
Mm.
the things that 15-year-old kids are learning about what's the behavior that human beings can do to each other is
Mm.
horrendous.
Mm.
But we're there. We know it's horrendous. We are not backing away. We're not lying to them about that it's any other way. But there is hope. There are people who are not like that. There are people who help to overcome that. Be initiated. Join us. Join us in the struggle for goodness and for
Mm.
justice and for peace. And sometimes you will feel overwhelmed. Sometimes you will be horrified, but you will not be alone. And this is the initiatory message that, you're becoming a man. That's only the beginning. You're 15, you're 18. The elders will be there for you. I'm 70. I have an elder who's 92, Jane. Um,
Mm.
he is vital to my functioning as a man. Um,
Wow.
I seek his help. He'll be gone sometime, and I'll have to carry my sense of him in my bones.
In you.
Um,
Yeah.
but I love hanging out with. I work with young activists, and so I love hanging out with the 35-year-old, 40-year-old guys who to me are very young.
Mm.
You're very young to me,
Mm.
and and I love the company of your generation because they're so smart, so idealistic, and it's a joy to just give that. It's like, oh, what I'm not doing anything. I'm just hanging out and admiring and affirming and steadying the ship.
Yeah.
Um, and they sort themselves out. Um, they go back and do the things which I could never do. Um, um, some of my friends hung a banner off the side of Parliament House yesterday in Hobart about native forest logging. Um,
Mm.
they were they were superb engineers. They know how to do something in absolute safety, the health, and they manage things beautifully. Any one of those people can manage themselves in the bush for weeks on end. Um,
Mm.
and this House of Parliament with some of the most incompetent human beings in the state, who mismanage the state to the point of bankruptcy, people whose IQs shock me, and running things. And then there's the young generation chanting outside the walls, um,
Mm.
you know, don't build a sports stadium that costs billions of dollars. Fix the hospital. Don't
Yeah.
trash the forests. We need those forests.
Yeah.
That generation, your generation, are um, so amazing. And but completely lost the point here. Um, but it's called verticality. And what
Mm.
verticality is, in a healthy society, older people look after younger people and they look
Yeah.
after even younger people, and it goes all the way through.
Yeah.
And um, and particularly in boys, they function best when they sense a safe hierarchy around them that provides a structure, and they know what the rules are. They know they can rely on those rules. They they like it when there's a clear goal
Mm.
to aim for, and they like the feedback when they've reached the goal.
Mm.
And so boys are very relational. If they in the classroom, they have to know that the teacher likes them.
Mm.
Their wiring, their testosterone wiring is absolutely safety or danger.
Mm.
Um, and um, if they sense, that sometimes this teacher just really doesn't like boys. It can be a man teacher or a woman teacher, doesn't matter. If they don't like boys, you know, not just tolerate them, but actively enjoy boy energy.
Mm.
If that's not the case, then the boy senses that hostility. He will
Mm.
not learn. Now,
Mm.
it's not willfulness. What it is that he does not feel safe enough to drop his guard.
Mm.
Um,
Interesting.
does that make sense? I mean, that's a pretty radical idea. Does that make sense, Jane, just listening off and being a mother of a boy?
It does, yeah, embrace the energy. Boy energy is completely different from girl energy, and embracing it is the key, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
not just tolerating, not just accepting, but embracing it. That's a really good point.
yeah, yes. I have a friend who's a primary school teacher, and um, she, I think it was grade two or grade three. Her kids absolutely believed that maths was an outdoor activity. Um, they did maths in the playground,
That's so good.
measuring,
That's a
counting, and
great way, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And um, but it's a very important thing to, if you're a parent of a little boy going to school, to ask that question: does their teacher like boys?
Mm.
Um, and I've trained the staff of probably 150 schools over the
Mm.
years in how to be a boy-friendly school.
Mm.
Um, and I'm a bit blunt about it. I say, if you don't like boys, go work in a girls' school,
Yeah.
because you will not be fulfilling your duties if
Mm.
the boys don't feel cared about. Um,
Mm.
and it's hard because they're often badly raised and they've got no boundaries, and they're they're underfathered, and underfathered boys are really hard work because
Mm.
it's to a fair degree it's dads who teach boys treat women with respect.
Mm.
Play rough and tumble on the floor, but don't hurt anyone.
Mm.
If you're hurting, we have to stop and calm down. Um,
Yeah.
from the age of about one, men are transmitting how to live in a male body
Mm.
safely,
Mm.
um, and be to have that great, robust
Mm.
exuberance and know exactly where to rein it in.
Mm.
And where to rein it in is at the point where it could endanger someone else.
Mm.
And so a little boy, when he comes to school, should already be like, yeah, it'll be fun, but I have to be careful of the person next to me, and not to run in the playground and knock someone over. Um, that's not rocket science, but it has to be trained.
Yeah.
And mums can do that. But boys take it in from dads because they somehow sense, dad has a body like mine. Um,
Mm,
um, and and dad reins his energy in. Dad you know, doesn't, we play wrestling. Dad doesn't hurt me.
mm,
He somehow managed to play wrestle with me, and I never feel scared or, or humiliated or anything like
mm.
that. And that's very much nonverbal. It's a sense you have. Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, very, Jane, this is very wide ranging. It's
I
good.
know, I know. I
Yeah.
think we can go on and on. I really like what you mentioned before as well about how with boys, you need different types of male role models in their life. There is always a deficiency in their dad, but you can feel that with introducing other males, other uncles, other dad's friends or mom's friends who are male to fill that gap so they can learn and also absorb different qualities in the male role models that they have in their life. I think that's such a great point because we're not all going to be artistic, we're not all going to be systematic the way we look at things, but the fact that they are exposed to all different kinds at early age. And I think the indigenous people are so good at this. I have a really good friend, Yanti, who came from indigenous community, and she talks about in her community, even little kids call the female role models the mums. Either it's
Mm,
their aunties or their mums, other siblings. It's just mums because they're all my mums. And it's
yes.
so good.
Yes.
It's such a
Yes.
great way to embrace, the village in the kid's life. I also like the verticality that you mentioned before, Steve. And I think I heard something quite similar from Dr. Gabo Mate when he talks about how we are viewing, at least in the Western community, we are viewing older people as, these just older people as opposed to being the elder that can
Mm,
pass on that wisdom and still be the community that can just balance or ground a few people that are trying to make a difference, for example. But you are able to, just like the right brain of the wild creature mind, it's able to give you a bigger, diverse perspective in life. And it's such a beautiful point that you made there.
thank you. Yes, I perhaps could like to unpack some of that for listeners and today that see role modeling is a very interesting thing. I think we've misunderstood how profound it is because if you think sometimes I, I for instance, get a group of 200 mothers together in a room. Sometimes I've had 200 mums together in London. I've done this and in quite a few places around the world, and started off by saying, and they're there because they want to understand boys better, understand their sons better. And I'd start in a very surprising way, kind of, which is always good when you're teaching to kind of take people by surprise. Let's design the perfect man. And 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 there's always this kind of ribald humor that sweeps across the room. 200 women in Jane is a very unruly, a very unruly phenomenon. I can barely sort of hold the reins. So there's a couple of ribald things are shouted out, but then people get down to it, and I've got my whiteboard and I'm writing away, and they're calling out things, and it'll be, well, kind, gentle, sense of humor. And then it goes a bit serious, and it's like trustworthy and reliable and patient. And you can see the faces of some of the women calling these words out, that when they say trustworthy, it's because they have experienced the opposite
Mm,
in the men in their lives. You know,
mm,
to them that's uppermost because they've experienced having a man who is not trustworthy, and it has harmed their world. And so all of a sudden the mood in the room is kind of like it's starting to get a bit serious in a good way. And we end up with a whiteboard full of these adjectives. And it turns out that they're in two completely separate, if you look at them closely, it's binary in an interesting way. There's the heart adjectives and the backbone adjectives, in the sense that We want our men to have heart, kind, loving, generous, playful, tender, exuberant, and we want them to have backbone, trustworthy, honest, reliable, strong, keep their commitments, show up when they said they would, stick around through the hard times. And so, what that means then, okay, with our boys, bringing this back now, so let's say you want your boy to be patient. Now, what patience actually is not a, it's a very abstract word. What it actually is, it's so abstracted, there is no point in saying to your child, be patient,
Mm.
because they don't know what that means.
Mm.
Patient is a way of breathing. It's a way of standing and sitting and a way of settling into yourself that says
Mm.
this is going to take a while.
Mm.
And so, and holding on to what you wanted to say, or what you wanted to put out there, but waiting your turn. And so it's a set of very complicated nonverbal behaviors and attitudes. Now,
Mm.
that sounds difficult, but there's a shortcut to doing it. If you know someone who is patient, if I love explaining this, I'm so excited about this. If if there is someone in your life who models patience and is
Mm.
patient with you, if
Mm.
dad is patient with his little daughter, if he's patient with his wife, then the little boy, he knows it in his bones,
Mm.
he's felt it. He's got, and role modeling, there are complex things called mirror neurons, which they take in. We're not a set of instructions. We're a set of people that we've
Yeah.
been around. You and I, and everyone watching or listening, you're a
Mm.
bundle of all the good people you've ever known.
Mm.
And you've taken them and you've bundled them into yourself.
Yeah.
And there's
Or the
even
opposite of
oh yeah, it
people
can be
that
the
you don't
bad,
like.
yeah, there can be the bad people you've
Yeah.
known as well,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
very important to kind of notice
Mm.
that. Um,
Mm.
and and so, good point, Jane. and and so, what that means we have to do, okay, this going right back to your point, we've got to make sure that our kids have got lots of those to bring in on board. And when we do a map of boyhood, but it's the same with girls. 0 to 7 you're in the world of mum, 7 to 14 you're in the world of dad.
Mm.
But bridging in gradually with those, you have to think, okay, it's not that a dad is deficient in the sense of a bad sense, but just he might not be into sport, you know,
Mm.
or he might be into sport, but he's not into ballet or he's not into art. He doesn't talk much, and the boy just is such a talker. Dad might be very academic and dry, but the boy loves physicality and loves the bush or nature or things like that. He's going to need, he may be gay or something that's just so different to dad. So he's going to need to see good men of his kind, of his flavor of masculinity. So you're
Mm.
aiming that your son's masculinity is like a broad pyramid
Mm.
that's built on all different kinds of males, so that he can build his own unique masculinity, but it's based on a broad selection. Now,
Yeah.
what we did in the past was we only dads were at work. There was hardly any men in boys' lives. The studies when I wrote Raising Boys, the average dad 6 minutes a day
Oh,
of
wow.
yeah. Now, in the course of when I wrote Raising Boys and when I rewrote it 20 years later, the studies had changed. The
Mm.
average dad was spending 35 minutes a day instead of 6.
Mm.
Now, I wrote the top-selling parenting book in the world this century. Its
Mm.
core message, it had many messages, but its core message, one of them was boys need dads. Or if you're a single mom or a gay couple of women,
Mm.
they told me this. We made sure our son met some good men.
Mm.
You don't have to marry them. They just have to know what one looks like.
Mm.
That they go to karate and the karate teacher's a really nice guy. Bang,
Mm.
you've ticked that
Yeah.
box. you know,
Yeah.
that the next door neighbor, the gay next door neighbor, next to your family, is really terrific, and your kids get to know him really well. So bang, they've experienced something that's different to them, to the narrow band, and it's built in there.
If there was, and there's a lot of golden nuggets from your new book, Wild Creature Mind. I've learned a lot about myself, actually, more than anything. If there is just one thing that we can all apply in our lives, either as a parent, as a child of your own parents, but just as a human being trying to do our best in the world, what would that be?
Okay. Well, the message of Wild Creature Mind is, and we can talk another time, we can really unpack this, Jane, but it's that you have to steady yourself first.
Mm,
And so whatever you do, it goes better if you steady yourself. And that where steadiness comes from is deep down in here. And so if you feel if you go down in here, what you will usually feel is some agitation.
mm,
And so if you pay attention to that, where does it live? What's it doing? Is it churning? Is it tingling? Is it tight? And you make it welcome, because this is your wild creature, the wild animal inside you, kind of ringing alarm bells a little bit. If you pay attention to it, 90% of the time it'll calm down, because you've just stopped racing along too fast. And you'll be right then, you can proceed. 10% of the time it will be, no, this is a flashing red light. What is it telling me? Don't put up with what's happening here, or don't keep going along this track, or stop and go and have a think before you say any more.
mm.
So it'll have real life consequences.
Guidance, yeah.
Guidance. Yeah, guidance. That's exact, Joe. You're very good with words. That's exactly the word. And so the one message of this book is it starts with you, and it starts with your body. And in the book, what we do is we teach people so that as I go through my day, as I go through this interview, I'm talking to you, but I'm checked in with my wild creature side.
Mm.
Is this making sense? Am I calm enough? Am I going off half cocked? Is it, or does it feel good-hearted? And
Mm.
and 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 so it's working along, I'm as much as possible, I'm whole, and I'm with you. It's all of me, all in the one
Yes.
place. And I hope, as we finish off, and I say to anyone who's been listening, um, I hope has touched your heart and has given you something useful. But regardless of that, the main message is that that as an old man, I cared deeply about your well-being and your children's well-being. Whether the ideas are right or wrong, it's much love to you as you go through your life, and let's turn this world around, because it really needs it. And thanks so much to Jane for being such an intelligent and warm interviewer, so that we covered so much ground. And yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
Mm.
And again, thank you for giving me 1 hour of your time. I know that you are in your, as you mentioned before, in your last decade of, being functioning, and that's something that I don't take for granted. But hopefully, I would be able to apply in my own life just a couple of decades earlier. We all don't matter in this world, and we all will die. And so, what can we all do to make this world a better place? So thank you, Steve.
Beautiful.
I hope this won't be the last time I'll hear from you, and I hope to meet you in person one day.
That would be fantastic, Jane, and we can always do some more when I've had a bit of a rest and my throat is better again. So, love to everyone. Bye bye for now.
Okay, bye, Steve.
Bye. Bye.
This episode of The Breadwinning Mums was produced by me, Jane Lim, and our theme music was produced by Sam McNally. We recorded this episode on the lens of dark people who have passed their parenting story for generations. We pay our respects to the elders past and present, and thank them for caring for country. Connect with us through LinkedIn or Instagram at Breadwinning Mums. Until next time.